If you have questions for speakers, please use the Q&A box only. Otherwise, we will not be able to take your questions. So really make sure to use the Q&A box for questions, and you can use the chat for comments related to what's being presented or for presenting yourself as you are all doing now. So thank you so much. So today we'll be looking at how the upcoming Circular Economy Act that has been announced by the Commission a few months ago could help EPR reach what we call its full potential. So we will explain what we mean by full potential in a bit. I won't be speaking too much right now. We have amazing speakers for that, but I will give you a bit of context and background to, set the stage. So can you see my slide moving? Yeah? Okay, perfect. So the European Commission, as you know, has announced the Circular Economy Act, which will focus on creating a single market for high-quality secondary materials. So the focus seems to be primarily on downstream measures to boost competitiveness. As you know, it's quite a key word currently. So that's important, especially given that, as you know, our circularity rates in the Europe are stagnating since a while. But so far, we also see that waste prevention and reuse aren't really getting enough attention in the discussion. The good news is that EPR is on the agenda, and it's we think it's our best chance to push beyond traditional waste management. So why EPR is important? Well, these schemes face quite a few challenges nowadays. We'll name a few. So lack of transparency from the producer responsibility organization. There's also fragmented rules and fees across the EU. The issue with free riders. But one topic we want to cover today is more on the fact that there is insufficient cost coverage, which is something that is often highlighted by municipalities as a problem. And very importantly, EPR currently have limited impact on waste prevention, including repair, reuse, and eco-design. And as I believe most of the participants are well aware of, EPR currently is making producers cover part of the cost of the end life stages of their products. And therefore, it has supported the development of collection and recycling infrastructures across Europe, which is good. But what it hasn't really succeeded in is preventing waste from ending up in the environment, nor has it succeeded in reducing overall waste generation or make products more reusable or repairable. So what we are facing is a paradox. And if we look at data from over the past decades, what we see is that waste generation across key streams covered by EPR often grows faster than the capacity to collect and recycle it. And whether we're talking about cars, textiles, packaging, it's the case. So that might suggest that EPR reinforces the use of disposable products instead of promoting their circularity. So clearly there is a problem we need to tackle. And the question we should be asking ourselves is, how can we make sure that EPR actually drives waste prevention, which is essential to achieve a true circular economy, one which is not based on recycling only? Or to rephrase it differently, how could we evolve it beyond waste management? And we've been thinking about that quite a lot over the last month at Zero Waste Europe and with other organizations and cities and solution providers. And this has led us to lead on 2 advocacy initiatives to influence the Circular Economy Act discussion on EPR in that direction. And I would like, just before to leave the floor to our panelists, to bring your attention very briefly on these 2 initiatives, as it sums up very nicely what we as a coalition of over 80 actors overall, representing civil society organizations, cities, reuse businesses, hope will happen in terms of EPR reform. So the first initiative was launched in July and finished today. So the webinar marks the end of this initiative, and it took the form of a manifesto called the Break the Single-Use Bias, which over the last 3 months gathered the signatures of 36 cities and business signatories. It included 13 major European cities such as Paris, Brussels, which is here today, Tallinn as well, Nantes, Lyon, Riga, and others. And reuse providers like Vital, Réseau Consigne in France, Touch Cups, or Consommation. And all these actors united under a manifesto which called for full cost coverage, dedicated financial instruments to fund reuse and prevention, and improved governance in PROs. But, oops, sorry, I just clicked on the link. Again, sorry. Today marks the launch of our EPR letter as well, which has been sent to the European Commission yesterday. It has been signed by 38 civil society organizations, such as New Era. We have one representative of New Era here today with us, and for example, also Deutsche Umwelthilfe, that I guess some of you know. And this letter lays out a set of key recommendations to make EPR truly circular and more inclusive, which my colleague Theresa Morsen will present shortly. So our hope for today is to explore with you all not only the current limitations of EPR, but also the opportunities to fix them and see how EPR can really contribute to circularity. And that's why you will hear from local authorities, sector experts will share the challenges, but also best practices and concrete ideas for improvement. And yeah, time for me to briefly present our speakers. So today you will hear first from Theresa Mersen, who is our Waste and Resources Policy Manager. Her work focuses on waste and resources, especially on the topic of textiles, EPR, obviously, and material consumption more generally. She's currently managing the Life for EPR project on EPR harmonization across the EU, and she will present Zerous Europe analysis of the shortfalls of current EPR systems and what we believe is the way forward. And then you will hear from two local authorities which reflect somehow the diversity of EPR implementation across the EU. First, you will hear from Mick Erik Seidler, who is producer responsibility specialist in the strategic management office of the city of Tallinn in Estonia, and from Frédéric Soelmans, who is the deputy mayor of the city of Brussels in charge of urban renewal, climate, citizen participation, and Dutch-speaking affairs. We will then hear from Ulysse Revat-Dantville, who is the head of public affairs at the New European Reuse Alliance, also called New Era, and currently is leading on the strategic follow-up of European legislation, such as the CEA. And finally, we'll have Janine Reuling, who is the founder and president of Collectif Circulaire Textile, also called CCT, which is a progressive PRO responsible for EPR legislation, for executing the EPR legislation for textiles in the Netherlands. So I spoke a lot, so let's get started with our first speaker, Theresa Mersen. We'll try to take a bit of time for questions after our presentation. So again, use the Q&A box to write your questions. Yeah, I leave you the floor, Theresa.
Thank you so much, Manon, for introducing me. Hello, everyone. It's glad to see that there's so many people in the room interested in the topic. I wanted to give you a general overview about what we regard as the EPR paradox and some of the policy recommendations that Zero Waste Europe has developed to amend this at the EU level, but also obviously across the continent at the national levels. You can go to the next slide, Manon. Thank you. So to kind of get us started, if we look at waste generation and waste collection, we see that over the past 2 decades, we've mainly seen an increase in waste generation. Since EPR was introduced, we've seen an increase in waste generation. And there's the question whether what's the link between EPR and waste generation. You can see there we've inserted a graph on packaging that while single-use packaging waste has been increasing, the recycling rates have also been increasing, but not at the same rate. And in the current trajectory, we don't really see recycling ever catching up with the waste generated, and we have a similar dynamic for the electrical waste from electrical appliances. Next slide, please. If we compare the original idea of the polluter pays principle and how it was implemented in the EU law, in the Waste Framework Directive, we see that the founding father of EPR, Thomas Lindquist, sorry, very bad Swedish on my end, has envisioned it in the 70s. We see that a while back, before I guess many of us were born, that they should promote the total life cycle environmental improvements of a product system. and extend the responsibilities of manufacturers of a product for the entire life cycle of the product. Well, if we look at the current legal implementation in the Waste Framework Directive, we see that producers are responsible for financing and have financial and organizational responsibility for the management of waste of a product. So there's like a bit of a mismatch on how it was initially envisioned. Next slide, please. A reality check on packaging reuse and EPR shows that despite the waste hierarchy placing reuse over recycling, reuse rates have been plummeting across sectors, not only packaging, and single use is also predicted to grow much faster than reuse options in the future, despite several initiatives to up reuse. The result is that there's growing concern about pollution, littering, resource use of all of those single-use appliances, and growing costs for municipalities and ultimately taxpayers, obviously funding the municipal budget. Thanks. So the challenges we see with the current interpretation and implementation of EPR are that it's agreed that EPR is just one tool in the toolbox of waste management. That's, I think, what many people agree on. It's not a silver bullet for everything, but it has very considerable power to mobilize funding and exert political influence, also via producer responsibility organizations. It creates this illusion that we have control over the waste generation, and it could potentially lock the system in the status quo of waste management. And this is what we call the EPR paradox. So this is a system that's been created to fix the waste problem many years ago, but it has become actually a roadblock that stops progress from working towards better collection and rejection measures such as reuse systems, not only for packaging. Next slide, please. And click again. Exactly. So what we see is to shift from the focus from waste to circularity. The polluters do pay, we don't contest this, but they don't pay the full cost of waste management. And we see that there's a mismatch between the polluter pays and does not equal the right to pollute. That's something we'd like to underline. And we have thought about how can EPR really boost circularity and sustainable waste management rather than being this fee to pay to pollute. Next slide, please. In the report that we published in the beginning of the year, we analyzed certain key challenges in the current system. So there's a lack of transparency, a fragmented approach, limited visibility, also for consumers. A lot of people don't actually know how EPR works and which products are covered. A lot of free riding, that's something we see producers complain about as well. There's inadequate oversight of the system. We now have a big deregulation pressure as well at the EU level, but also nationally. Capacity constraints for all actors to be involved and be on top of best practices and the system, and cost coverage limitation that I just mentioned. Next slide, please. We see a two-pillar solution as a potential way forward. The first pillar is what we call system optimization, and it's all in the report. I won't go into detail because we don't have the time today. We'll focus on the second pillar, which is circular economy enabler, and there we think EPR has the power to become a tool for transition towards a circular system, and I'll talk you through a couple of the proposals we're making there. I don't know if you can go to the next slide. Exactly. So the first obstacle that we saw is the cost coverage limitation, and that really needs to be adjusted. And this is just an example of what we mean here. If you look at this graph, is the packaging waste collected in Barcelona, and we see that there's a huge amount, the grey bar, is collected in mixed waste, and some of it is collected separately. And in most EPR schemes, what the PROs are paying for is only the separately collected waste, not the waste that's not properly collected. And this is obviously where we want to go. We want to have all of the waste separately collected and properly dealt with. So this is a general problem we're seeing, and without EPR systems fully internalizing the costs, including litter removal, including the treatment of mixed waste, it's not a system that's fair or that's driving circularity. Next slide, please. So what we propose is what we call a double fee structure for EPR to drive circularity. First, we have the in the first second row, we have the waste management fee that should cover the waste management necessary for the collection and recycling rates. So this is improving what we currently have. And then this will be set at the national level, reflecting national operation costs, and it will cover waste collection, treatment, and communication, basic communication with consumers to properly separately collect and separate their waste. And then the second row is the prevention and reuse fee. And this is what's been introduced in some EPR schemes across Europe. We have a little bit of progress on packaging. We have some schemes that allocate funds to reuse and repair. And this is also set at the national level to cover the national costs depending on the context. Obviously, labor costs vary hugely across the EU. There's different national contexts, urban, rural areas, all very different. And this prevention and reuse fee should really finance skills and training, repair and reuse infrastructure, and reverse logistics, for instance, for reusable packaging. And this is really the thing that we see as key in the is a missing piece in the current EPR setup as it's been established at the EU level. There's a third adjacent fee. This outside EPR schemes is called the eco-design fee, that would be more linked, in our view, to the ESPR eco-design requirements that are coming in for many products. This could be an incentive for eco-design and consumer behavior. It can be a supranational tool harmonized at the EU level, so across our entire market, and it could potentially become a new own resource for the EU. Obviously, this is a debate that's outside of today's focus. It's just to show you that this is where we see the kind of eco-modulation moving in the long run. Next slide. Exactly. So we're focusing on the kind of two EPR fees that I presented, and to make those efficient, we need to overcome the cost coverage barrier. So we currently have a legal provision in the Waste Framework Directive that sets a cost coverage to waste management only, and if we have a clear definition of the roles of both of EPR and those fees, we think this can really become a driver of circularity. The new definition we're proposing is that EPR should cover the costs of various parts of the entire use and end of life cycle of a product, and with the objective to provide the best environmental outcome in line with the waste hierarchy. And this is something I really underline, that the waste hierarchy puts reuse clearly over recycling, over waste treatment. And this adjacent eco-design eco-modulation fee is something that doesn't really shouldn't sit in the EPR scheme and should not be linked to the cost coverage, but an incentive for circularity in the long run. The next slide, please. One last point on the governance of EPR schemes. We've seen many EPR schemes that there's a lack of stakeholder inclusion. So municipalities, social enterprises who deal with a lot of the reuse, repair, collection of goods such as textiles, furniture, electronics are not included. So are recyclers often. So the idea is that if EPR schemes give a proper seat at the table and inclusion for everyone, they can really reflect all of those positions better. The current Waste Framework Directive was revised for textiles, and there we see the provision that relevant actors should be involved in the implementation of the EPR schemes. And we think that's a really good precedent that's been set for textiles and should definitely be adopted for other waste streams and other EPR schemes as well. Yes, next slide. This was it from my side. I hope it didn't run over time. I didn't actually check the time.
No,
So
it's
we now
perfect.
have time for Q&A, I think.
Yeah, we have maybe 6-7 minutes, so it's good. Um, well, there are a few questions in the chat, Teresa. Perhaps I see that Janine is already answering perhaps one, but maybe you can also answer it orally. It's coming from Lucia Pereira. She's asking if you could give example of free riding behaviors and how to tackle them.
Examples, I think, are plenty. So obviously, producers that put products on the market need to register for an EPR scheme if they are putting, for instance, a product, packaging on the market anywhere in the EU. There's mandatory EPR for that. In other countries, it varies whether there is, for instance, an EPR for textiles or not. So now, a lot of producers kind of go around that. There's a lot of free riding from online marketplaces. So if you buy something online, the producer might have not registered with the EPR scheme in the country and is kind of free riding in the back of all the producers that do that. So this is particularly something we see in online marketplaces. There's some because you ask how to tackle that. I think there's no kind of golden solution that we found yet, but there's some countries that hold online marketplaces accountable. There's, for instance, a law in Germany that makes online marketplaces accountable for the producers that sell on their platform. So that would be an idea that could be replicated in other countries. I hope that answers your questions. Otherwise, I'm happy to follow up.
I think if I'm not mistaken, I think Lucia Pereira worked for Réseau Vrac Réemploi in France, I believe. So in case you can, stay in touch. There's another question from Célia Renesson, who's asking who will collect the eco-design fee if not the PROs?
This is something that we see as not an immediate policy solution. Maybe would it help to go back to the slide where we present the eco-design fee, perhaps? And I think it's like 2 or 3 slides back. Maybe that makes it easier for everyone to follow. Thank you. That's the one. So the eco-design fee you're referring to is the one that we see outside EPR schemes. So that's indeed wouldn't be collected by the PROs. Because our idea is that it would be linked to the incoming ESPR eco-design requirements for products. For instance, they are under development for textiles. So we will have those criteria coming in, and we could then think about an eco-design fee linked to those criteria. If a product is very sustainable according to those criteria, there would be less of a fee. If it's not sustainable, obviously we need to figure out the kind of rates. The producer has to pay more. We thought about this as an EU harmonized measure, which would mean that also the EU would have to collect it. So it wouldn't be set at the member state level. It would be set at the EU level, which is very much in line with the single market approach for product policy in general. So if you put a product on the EU market, you need to comply with the overall regulation at the EU level, not in every single country, whereas waste is still, because it's a directive, it's very much member state dependent. It's transposed in the member states. It's transposed in a different way in all the member states, which makes it so complicated to get your head around. Yes, so I hope answers your question. That it's supposed to be a harmonized tool collected by the EU.
Yeah, thank you. Just saying we're not gonna have time to answer all the questions in the chat. So Teresa, feel free to then answer them directly in the Q&A box.
I see the box. Thank you.
Perhaps time for one last question. Maybe more on the governance aspect. There's one question from Nicola Sarmiento asking regarding stakeholder inclusion. Have you noticed any particular stakeholder group that is less included and where more work needs to be done?
This depends a little bit on the member state. We, like in general, the observation we had, because we work a lot with cities, or Nor's actually the one who's in touch there, and we have some city representatives here today who I think can add a little bit to this. But a lot of municipalities have no, like municipality organizations have no seat at the table in PRO governance and PRO decision making, while they're affected by those decisions, because ultimately their budget is affected, and they're actually dealing with the waste that's collected locally. There's also the complaint from reuse operator. If you think about social enterprises or charities who collect clothes, for instance, who are somewhat included, but as textiles EPR will become mandatory across the EU from mid-2028. Some countries have it, some countries will have this before. We are afraid that sometimes those social enterprises and reuse operators that are really running, they're the backbone of collection, reuse, and repair for textiles, and they won't be included in the system properly, and their voice won't be heard, and potentially they have to deal with all they're overwhelmed already by all the fast fashion items that are placed on the market, but they might be more on a strain when PROs take charge of all of the textile waste, and might redirect it to other operators without taking into account the current system for textile reuse, for instance.
Yeah, thank you so much, Teresa. Yeah, again, for the questions which haven't been answered, yeah, feel free to answer them directly in the Q&A box, or to reach out to us via email. That's also perfectly possible. We will now head to our panel discussion. We will gather some different perspective from different stakeholders on the future of EPR, and we will get started directly with Erik Seidla, who is an EPR specialist for the City of Tallinn. I will stop sharing very briefly and resharing his presentation. Sorry for that. I'm asking you for 1 minute of patience. All right. Can you all see my screen? Yeah. All right. Then, Erik, the floor is yours. I'll let you unmute yourself.
You. Hello from my side. I'm from City of Tallinn, and I will be talking about. First of all, I will introduce. Can you put the next slide, please? First of all, I will give a small overview about the EPR system in Estonia, because it's a little bit different compared to other member states. So I will start from this side. So in Estonia, we have 3 packaging producer responsibility organizations with equal market shares. So we have to, as a municipality, we have to treat them equally. All the collection points we have in Tallinn, over 400, we have to equally give them out to 3 organizations. So it's quite an interesting challenge for me, but right now it's getting better. Right now, they're covering public collection point maintenance, graffiti, emptying containers, new containers, packaging waste, littering nearby, all that stuff. It was a quite huge challenge a few years ago to get negotiation with responsibility organizations. It wasn't really easy to get all the things into the contracts, so it wasn't the easiest thing to from the municipality side. It's also, I wanted to point it out here. But from the local authority side, we're covering the littering, the other waste littering near the collection points. It's around 20,000 euro per year in the whole Tallinn. So it seems not a big amount, but every euro for this, in my opinion, isn't good for a municipality. So if it would be 0, then it would be a lot better. Also, we built the infrastructure for our UNESCO Old Town. We built 10 public collection points that cost around 15,000 euros. There's a picture of them on the slide, the wooden covered collection points. Citizens and also the municipality people who are protecting UNESCO old towns are also really glad to see the results. So this was a really huge success from this side. Also, the citizens, mostly the citizens, have enjoyed wooden covered collection points. Also in Estonia, we have electronic waste EPR systems. We have 2 producer responsibility organizations in this field, and the other EPR systems we don't have. Textile is right now in the government's side deciding. They're deciding do we have it in Estonia in the future or not. But yeah, it's right now in a deciding phase. But yeah, next slide, please. So what are the main challenges? Packaging collection points, maintenance problems, infrequent container emptying. It's really hard to get it emptied for more often than after 4 days after. Sorry, it's really hard to like get logistics more frequent than after 4 days. So yeah, it's really complicated. But the citizens and from the municipality side, we would like to see it more often. But yeah, it costs, and that's why they don't want to make it more frequent. Also, the littering side, people are putting almost everything near the collection points. It's really a huge problem, but it's getting better. Maybe the knowledge is getting better. People are getting more environmentally aware. Maybe that's the one reason, because 5 years ago it was really bad. Right now it's getting better. So hopefully we're doing something right in the environmental acknowledgement. So we're also doing this part in the city of Tallinn. Also, there's not enough collection points that meet citizen expectations, because everyone wants to give their packaging waste away basically in front of their house. So, but it's not reasonable to put collection points everywhere in every house. So, but maybe in the future we are changing it, and maybe we will have the door-to-door collection in 5 years or so. Some collection points aren't welcomed by citizens. It's too loud, it's too much littered, and all the visual side, they don't like it, that they just don't like the color of it and all that stuff. Also, we have a lack of cooperation with packaging organizations. They are motivated to find ways to collect more packaging waste because they achieve their goal without doing extra steps. So that's also I would like to point it out. So, but next slide, please. But from the reuse and prevention side, as a city of Tallinn, we have public reusable textile collection points around 17. That's the upper photo on the slide. You can see there's it's funded by NGOs, textile NGOs. So city doesn't pay for them, but we have put the collection points in the whole city of Tallinn. Also, we have the circular economy centers. There's a picture, the latest one that was opened last year. The one is on the picture. It's a really nice place. It's a lot more different than the previous ones, because the previous ones, the main focus wasn't the reuse and prevention, but it was more like a waste treatment center. So it has also made a shift in our organizations, that we're moving towards the circular economy centers, not as waste treatment centers. So it's a huge step forward. And we have also the reuse rooms for reusable textiles and items, for example, for furniture workshop, also clothes and furniture textile repair workshop, and 2 repair workshops for metals and wood. Also, people are visiting them, and it's really popular. So it's a really good way to implement reuse and prevention in the small scale also. But it has citizens have liked it. So also we have the circular economy development plan 2035. It's implemented right now, and we are doing steps to implement it even more towards the 2035. Yeah, next slide, please. Also about the next steps, with the extended EPR system, there will be more funding to reuse and prevention sector. So 100% we agree on this side. Also, we are hopefully getting more funding from the municipal side and from the EU funding sides. We have some projects waiting approval from Interreg and other EU funding organizations. Also, the more funding will open new opportunities for reuse prevention, NGOs and companies and circular economy centers to build new workshops, construction material banks. Yeah, we have a huge funding project pending right now on the construction material bank side. So it's a really interesting way to improve the construction material bank also, and also this sector. Also, hopefully, we are trying to push restaurants from the reusable dishes and cutlery side. So the takeaway, hopefully, in the future will be only on reusable dishes and cutlery. So we're hopefully moving with this even more further. But yeah, that's from my side. And thank you very much. And hope here's a nice picture from Tallinn. So hope you have some questions for me.
Thank you so much. So how it's going to work now, we're going to have a presentation from Frédéric Solmans and then the two other speakers.
Okay.
And then we'll have a bigger Q&A session at the end. Don't worry for the participants who have already left some questions in the Q&A box. They will be answered at the end of the webinar. We'll try to take roughly 20 minutes for this. So yeah, I'm gathering them. So yeah, now it's time for Frédéric Solmans to speak. Frédéric is, as I was presenting him, previously the deputy mayor of the city of Brussels, and yeah, he will provide us a bit of a new perspective on EPR and challenges from Brussels. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay.
Do you see my screen now?
We do, yeah.
Okay, perfect, it works. Hi everyone, thanks for having me. I'm since December 24, I'm the Deputy Mayor of Climate here in the city of Brussels, and it's really nice giving our local story about the scaling the use in Brussels and unlocking the potential of the EPR platform. Maybe just in general, a bit like giving a bit more context. So Brussels the city of Brussels is one of the 19 communes of the region of Brussels. It's a city of 200,000 people, and the region is 1.2 million. And the household waste management is done by the regional authority, by the regional waste management system, and the local waste management administration, I would say, or services are mostly done for public spaces, parks, littering, which is a big problem in Brussels as well, and also general waste management, which I will get to shortly. But maybe for the city of Brussels in general, we have each year around 1,100 tons of unsorted waste, and this is only covering events and living on the public squares, which is a huge problem for us because it really costs a lot, around 200,000 euros each year. And if you know that our total budget is around 7 million, then you see that this is really a big issue. We must point out that a significant part of this waste consists single-use plastics. We have put some frameworks into function, which I will go to shortly. But in general, Brussels is also, considering its socioeconomical situation in some parts of the city, a city which has a big problem in littering, in uncivilized behavior in the streets, which is sometimes a real problem. In the historic city center, we have still a waste management which is mostly done by garbage sacks. And this is something that we really need to address rather quickly. It's mostly new developments and also new redoing of public streets and public squares where we put, I would say, garbage containers in the grounds for better waste management. But in general, a lot of quantity of waste, which is yearly treatment in the city of Brussels, is still done by collecting the garbage sacks in the street, mostly because of its historical situation and the urban historical fabric of our city. So currently, none of these costs which we put into place to cover this littering and cover are mostly.
Eric, so sorry to interrupt. Are you changing slides because we do not see them?
Yeah. Is this work? Yes.
Yes, now it's working. Sorry.
It's working. Okay. So mostly, none of the costs that we're covering is now funded or is covered by eco organizations or as PROs. So mostly it's on the city's behalf as well. Out of the regional government really provides us on a subsidy of like 1 million annually. This is not linked to any distribution from those organizations. So we eventually hope that we could implement an extended producer's responsibility that will benefit municipalities, that will benefit us. And this is something that was probably very unlikely in this legislation, but we're working on it. In Brussels, we really see that we come to the limits of a system where the cities carry the cost of disposability, and where we really would argue and we would nudge producers to take their deal or to take their part in the system. So local policy levers to support the reuse sector. So what are we doing? What can we do? What are we doing in Brussels? We have introduced on the 1st of July in 2019 a total ban on the use of single plastics during events, so mostly events. There are some other sectors as well, but the main focus was on events because the City of Brussels organizes an enormous amount of events each year, figuring its status as the capital and also the center of this region. So there's a lot going on the city streets and the urban squares, and this prohibition, that's the word, of the use of single plastics is really paying off. It's not only a prohibition, we also like to put into place some measures to help people and to nudge people into doing the right sort. If people want to organize an event on our streets, then we ask them to aim the ban of single-use plastics and highlight the best practices, which is the prohibit of products, the products tolerated, but whose use that we should be reducing, so that we want to have a decline in some products that are still used if there is no alternative, and already giving them a possible undesirable alternatives, which we want to put into place. So we have a stock of now 300,000, if I'm not mistaken, reusable cups that we offer to event organizations to use. We are now also trying to put into place the same idea for plates and cutlery, which is more difficult, I would say, than just the cups as well. Maybe maybe a good idea, or maybe a little detail or a little example, which you see in the photo right underneath, right, which is the winter wonderland of Brussels. So the Christmas market, I would say. There we see that our cups are really working and they are really paying off. We have access points, we have collectible points that we put into place everywhere. But in Belgium, there is this habit of having also Genever, which is a strong liquor which we drink out of little glasses, and there is not yet an alternative to little plastic cups of this specific scale. So that's something that we want to work out. But sometimes we just have to assume, or we just find out that there is not always a good offer in the market yet. So also on that side, it's not only banning single-use packaging and asking the responsibility of producers, but it's also working on the other side, which is the alternatives and finding a better product which plays in advance of transitioning this behavior. why are cities backing the reform proposal? We are fully committed to do that because we see that we're completely getting stuck in this financial weight that is laying on our city finance, which is not at the best moment for this moment. So really trying to find a shift in responsibility, but also a shift in funding, a shift in who gets to pay what. That's something that we really want to put into place, that we will want to support as well. So the full cost coverage by the PIBO for the entire life cycle of the product is something that we also in Belgian legislation generally was already put into place. But sadly, or maybe the main problem with that is that the key point is where there is also a fee modulation. That's something that is really limited. So that's something that we really should add in a new proposal for these kind of schemes. So maybe to tell you something more about our PROs, we have them as well. They're working really well. They are really doing a fine job. But the local governances have no part in the decision-making process of them. So that's really something that we see as a problem as well. We should have a seat at the table where we can nudge or we can work on, let's say, on a better reform proposal, and that's something that we'll try to get into place as well. So for us, an EPR can be a lever for change, and it's not only if it starts by financing what cities like Brussels are already doing upstreams. We are doing an enormous amount of efforts, but sometimes we see that like the whole industry needs to evolve as well. Or maybe for the future, what are we still planning? We are planning a biomass installation in Brussels, because a few years ago we separated the organic waste from the already recycling circles that we've put into place. But now also the organic waste is a separate flow, I would say, and therefore we need a biomass installation where we can use the biomass as a source for energy. That's something that has delayed because of the costs as well, but that's something that we should create, and maybe we should activate also the industries in getting this done and getting this built. Also, the lack of cooperation is for us a big problem from different actors. It's something that we should work on as well, but it's something that I heard in the case of Tallinn as well. So I see that we're not alone. About the textile collection points, which we also have in Brussels, we see that there's that we are I would say arriving at the end of this system, because of fast fashion, because of littering in those container bins, because of the quality of the textiles, which are probably which could probably be reused in a new life cycle. There we see that the quality of this textile is really very low. There is really an evolution in the last 10-15 years where we really see that it becomes a real problem treating this whole system of reuse of textiles. So we need to find something else for that. That's why we also joined the Textile Roads program, because I think that in the near future we're gonna probably see the reusable textile collection points ending, because it's for the managing organizations, which are just ASBLs, so associations which do that with a small budget, which that they see that it's not really paying off anymore, and that it's almost impossible to continue that. And then nudging our restaurants and horeca, that's something that is already putting in place as well, where we ask our horeca and restaurants and bars to use reusable plates and cutlery. It's not always working, it's mostly nudging, but that's something that we are going to work on in the near future as well. I think that's around it in a real brief overview of what we're doing. Did I forget something? So, no, I think this is probably it. And
yeah, that's perfect.
Thank you for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Frédéric. Yeah, super interesting. And yeah, before we move on to our two last speaker, Perhaps Frédéric and Mick-Eric, feel free to answer to the few questions which are in the Q&A box. As I said, we'll take about 15-20 minutes at the end to answer more questions, but there are a few straightforward questions in the Q&A box which you can answer already, I would say. So time to move on to our next speaker, who's Ulysse Revat-Dantonville. I hope I say your name properly. As I said, Ulysse is the head of public affairs at the New Era European Reuse Alliance, also known as New Era. And for the ones of you who do not know New Era, they are the leading trade association representing businesses dedicated to advanced, refillable, and reusable packaging solutions in Europe. Thank you so much, Ulysse, for being with us. I leave you the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And thanks a lot for having us today, inviting us for this webinar. So yes, my name is Ulysse Revat-Dantonville, and I'm the head of public affairs at New Era. And today I'm very happy to be able to share a bit our perspective on how, yes, the EU Circular Economy Act can unlock the potential of EPR, and also will be focusing specifically more on how it can help to scale up a bit reuse. And I like to start my presentation. Does it work? Yes, excellent. With some good news, and because we see that there are some good conditions today for scaling reuse. First of all, we have new legislation at EU level, so that was adopted during the past mandate. So we see, for example, the EPR or the packaging and packaging waste regulation. Second good condition is that we have many and more innovative companies. And finally, we also see that there is expectation from municipalities, citizens for more sustainable options. So that's for the good news, but it's not only good news, because we see that there is one major obstacle, and this is the economics, and that creates quite of a difficult situation. Indeed, today, the reuse industry is asked to achieve some targets, for example, have it in the PPWR, but it must do it in a system, an economic system that still favor linear and single-use model. So now we need to find a way on how we can unlock the potential of reuse. And we believe the way to do so is through creating a real level playing field. And it means two things. On one hand, it means to price the single-use container product or packaging, for example, at its real cost, and also to reduce the cost of a reusable product or packaging. And this is where we see that the Circular Economy Act and the EPR could become important lever to rebalance a bit this system. And to begin with, I would like to take a bit of a step back and look about what's the reuse economy today. So to begin with, reuse is very diverse ecosystem, spanning from repair, refurbishment, refill, reuse as well. And it's not just one industry. It covers and is present in many industries. We see it in the construction material, textile, electronic, automotive, and of course, packaging. Here, just to give you some example, we see, for example, in the automotive sector, that 39% of the companies are in the reuse market, and it represents in France 21 billions of revenues. We see it also in transport packaging, like wooden pallets, are already reaching a very high reuse rate of 80%. Here, just to say that reuse at scale, it's possible. And now, if we zoom into packaging, which is my field of predilection, if I may say, we see that it's also very diverse. And it's diverse also from a time perspective, because we have very long established system, and we also have new entrants. For example, if I look at my membership, we see that 1/3 of our organization were founded before the 2000, and some even trace their roots back in the beginning of the 20th century, mostly for transport and beverage. And we also saw that we have newcomers, and for example, 1/4 of our members have been created in after 2020, the 2020, and mostly for e-commerce, takeaway, and IT services. So what we have today is we have a reuse industry that is both anchored in the past, in the reality, and with a new wave of innovation. However, it's still a marginal sector. And today we say that for packaging, it represents around 2% of the market, of the packaging place in the market today. So at New Era, we have identified 3 main levers on how we could help unlock the potential of reuse. And one is ambitious, clear, and enforced legislation. Second one is adequate investment and access to financing. And the third one is standardization across member states. And today I will focus on the second level, and so on finance and investment, and I will discuss it through the concept of EPR. Now, what are the problems with the current EPR scheme? So as Teresa explained in the beginning, that it should be the idea of the EPR tool was to be designed for resource management. However, in the reality for now, it's mostly a waste management tool, and therefore it doesn't create the scheme the incentive to push for more than recycling, where it should be focusing also on prevention and also overuse. The three main obstacles that we have seen at NEURA are the following. The first one is the administrative complexity. We see that there is a high degree of discretion over how the EPR scheme are set in different member states, and which makes it extremely difficult for businesses to comply to. For example, we see that there is like different registration process, different reporting formats, and also different approach to calculating fees. And this is the case just for packaging, but it's also the case for all the other industries. So if you're operating in different sectors at the same time, it means that you have to comply to so many different EPR schemes, which makes it extremely difficult, and particularly for SMEs, because it represents a huge burden to them. That was for the first point. The second one is on eco-modulation. Today, eco-modulation is rather weak, and we believe that it's a key lever to help tackle the two first steps of the waste hierarchy. Because today, single-use packaging, it should reflect its true environmental costs, so the carbon emission, the liter cleaning cup, the resource extraction, etc. And today, it is not reflected in the price. So we believe that it creates a market where single use appears to be way cheaper than it should be, and therefore we should, via eco-modulation, find a way like to recalibrate the price between single use and reuse. And the final point is funding allocation is insufficient for reuse system. Indeed, a functioning reuse ecosystem requires good logistics, reverse logistics, washing facilities, digital tracking, etc. And these are very capital intensive investments with quite long payback times. Just to give you here an example, we see that 20% of our members report a return on investment of more than 4 years, 10% it takes more than 6 years, and we have almost half our membership that has not reached their return on investment. And as I mentioned earlier, quite a big part of the reuse industry are SMEs or startups, and so having access to finance is quite difficult and is another barrier to scaling. And we believe that EPR is a good tool that could help if we manage to tweak it a bit through the Circular Economy Act that could really help to unlock the potential of circular economy in Europe. So what needs to change? First of all, we believe we need to focus on the harmonization and the digitization of the EPR scheme. It should be standardized at EU level to ensure consistent methodology for reporting, performance tracking, and eco-modulation. Also, we should have an easy digital tool to use where you could have all the operation with a single platform that is clear and well designed. So for all the companies, even for SMEs, it's easier to comply with the EPR obligation. First one. The second one, in regards to the eco-modulation of fees, we believe that producers should pay a differentiated fee based on the product durability, reusability, and the repairability. So it will really incorporate in the price the environmental impacts they have on the environment. And finally, we believe it's very important to have well-calibrated eco-modulation in the sense that it should be an incentive that would push for the producer to switch from a less environmental product to a more environmental benefit product. And finally, what we believe is very important is a funding fund for reuse system. Indeed, EPR should help to finance a reuse system. On one hand, from the capital investment, as I explained, it's very capital intensive at the beginning when we launch a reuse system, and also for the operational expenses such as collection, maintenance, system coordination. And finally, to ensure this works well and is well thought, we need to work on the governance and transparency. But here I won't mention it again because Teresa had mentioned it at the beginning of this webinar. So yes, basically that was a bit what we wanted to present and how do we see we could, through the EPR, try to unlock a bit the potential of reuse in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ulysse. Again, there are a few questions in the chat for you. Feel free to answer them directly. In the Q&A box, sorry, and we will take more in a few minutes. And then yes, time for last speaker. Last but not least, Janine Reuling, who's the founder and president of Collective Circular Textile. As I said, it's the PRO responsible for executing the EPR legislation for textile in the Netherlands. And yeah, happy to have you, Janine. Thanks you for being here. And yeah, very curious to hear, as a PRO, what are the best practices that should be hopefully be replicated not only in the textile sector, but in other waste streams covered by EPR. Thank you.
Thank you, Manon. Yes, I also really hope so. So yeah, as Manon said, Collective Circular Textiles is a PRO for textiles in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is the second country in Europe to have the EPR legislation. And we have started what we call an alternative PRO specifically to sort of showcase that EPR has not yet reached its full potential because of all the things that we've heard in the previous talks. So we are trying to showcase that EPR can be done differently. So yeah, I will tell a little bit about that. Just a very brief overview of the legislation that we have in the Netherlands at the moment. It officially started in July 2023, but 2025 is the first year in which the targets need to be met. So last year it was only a reporting obligation on the amount of textiles put on the market. And this year is the first year that we actually have to meet the targets, over which we will have to report in 2026. So people often ask me, like, what is happening? Nobody knows yet, like to which extent the targets will be met. But this is an overview of 2025 leading up to 2030, and it gradually increases every year. So that would be a lot of text to put on this slide, but just have to believe me when I say it gradually increases every year. So what we see, what is interesting, is that we have reuse targets for textiles, which is actually a preparation for reuse target. But we also have a sub-target of reuse that is reused in the Netherlands. So it's local reuse target, which is, I think, very good to also ensure that local, most of the time, social actors have a specific place within the EPR legislation. We also have fiber-to-fiber recycling targets. There's no mandatory recycled content target, so there's a lot to say about that, about how it doesn't yet close the loop, but at least the fiber-to-fiber recycling target is there. Briefly, we currently have 3 PROs in the Netherlands, of which Collective Circular Textiles is one. Legally, every single producer is responsible, but once they sign up with the PRO takes over the legal responsibility. And it's also important to note that the PRO is, to a certain extent, free to set the height of the fee that they ask, but it is bound to cost coverage provision, which we've heard about before, also in Teresa's presentation, which makes it difficult to raise fees endlessly. That's a completely separate discussion, and I don't have time to go into that right now, but please feel free to ask the questions in the chat. So about CCT, why did we start? What makes us different? CCT was started by an environmental NGO, which is very, very different than what we normally see. Normally it's business associations, big producers that set up a PRO, but Fair Resource Foundation, a Dutch NGO, has started CCT. And it was specifically because we saw that based on our experience with other EPR schemes in the Netherlands, in other countries, like for packaging, for tires, for electronics, we saw that these big monopolies don't actually work to advance the circularity in a specific product group. And we feel that EPR, as has already been said, it's not the full solution, but it's a very important piece of the puzzle, and it doesn't yet fully support the circular transition, even though it has the potential to. So we know that monopolies don't work when there's a couple of big producers that sort of set out the direction of a PRO and also decide on what happens with the money, with a strong lack of inclusive governance, where basically all the other stakeholders that actually make the circular economy work, so that's the sorters, the recyclers, the reuse, social enterprises, but also repair initiatives, if they are all left out of the system and are basically only told what to do by a couple of big producers, then circularity isn't really going to advance in the way that we see it. So therefore, we said we need to start an alternative PRO, which is CCT, with a sole focus on making positive impact. So it's positive impact both on a social level as well as on an environmental level, really focusing on the needs of the market also. So including a broad group of stakeholders within the governance of the PRO to ensure that the system that is being set up actually also works for the market. Because otherwise, if you have like a very small perspective on what should happen, it oftentimes doesn't really meet the reality on the ground. And we really hope that CCT will also be seen as a blueprint for other European countries, given that we are now going to have EPR for textiles in all European member states. So briefly, what we would like to see in EU legislation is also the 3 pillars that we have within CCT. The first one is the focus on making impact, so really going beyond compliance. Even though we have good sort of basic legislation in the Netherlands, unfortunately, we are not going to have harmonized legislation on an EU level. That's very much a missed opportunity, if you ask me. But it is also important as a PRO to take the legislative target as a starting point. They are ambitious, so it's also going to be difficult to meet them. But it is a starting point in the sense that you always have to see, okay, what else can we do? So if repair is not necessarily part of legislation, how can you ensure that repair still forms part of the ecosystem you're going to build as a PRO? And it's a very different mindset, and it's a very different way of looking at EPR and the role of a PRO than what we know so far. But it is really something that we feel is important, because PROs often have like a very, very large sum of money that they manage. So you need to make conscious choices of what you do with that money and really spend it on circular initiatives instead of sort of financing the status quo. And I think the financing the status quo is something that we've seen for way too long. So inclusive governance, I mentioned it before. CCT has an inclusive board, so it's more stakeholders than only producers. It's also a relatively young organization, so this is something that's still developing. It's also pioneering, so it's difficult to have sort of perfect inclusive governance from the start. And I always say inclusive governance is not the easy way. It's way easier to sort of bring together a couple big producers that all want like a very cheap system, and then we will just go with the cheap system. Inclusive governance is not easy, but we do feel that it's very important, specifically of what I mentioned before, that a system needs to also meet the needs of the different stakeholders. And you cannot do that by leaving out those stakeholders. You really need to include them. But also before the setup of a PRO, they also need to be included in the actual drafting of the legislation. So what we've also seen in the Netherlands is that the focus when drafting legislation is very much, again, on the producers, because the government says, yeah, well, it's called producer responsibility, so it's also the producers who need to do it. So, you know, we will just talk to the producers. But that's way too limited for having good policy in place. And lastly, the transparency issues are very big, specifically with monopoly PROs. So we see that it often becomes this black box. Decision-making is not transparent. Financial transactions are not transparent. Producers themselves oftentimes don't know what happens with their money. And this is something that we really want to change. So transparency needs to be central, both within the organization, so how decisions are being made, how money is being spent, coupled with the inclusive governance model, so also people really have a say in what happens. And at the same time, really focusing also trying on how can we ensure that there's more transparency in the whole value chain, which is not something that's part of the legislation, but once again, it is important for building a circular system because you need to know what happens with, in this case, the textiles. I also saw a comment in the chat about textiles being shipped or products being shipped to countries outside of Europe. You need to know what is happening in order for the system to be changed. Because if you don't know where the textiles are going, then you can also not make a difference. So I promised Manon I would keep it very short, so I will just keep it with this. And if there's any questions, I will just put them in the chat. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Janine. So yeah, finally time for questions. So we can now dive in some specific aspects of the topic. There are a few questions in the chat. There are also a few questions we have internally. And I think I will start, Janine, to ask you something about this point you made about inclusive governance. So it's one of these key, let's say, axes of your strategy. So yeah, in your view, which stakeholders should be included in PR governance in the textile sector? And yeah, who should contribute to the decision-making process and why? So if you have any tips and ideas to share.
Definitely. So for us, one of the things that we've noticed was that textiles from a legislative point of view are very, very much seen as this sort of homogeneous group of products, which is definitely not the case. So there is a distinguishment in the legislation between sort of household textiles and consumer textiles. But one of the aspects that we noticed after we had a lot of conversations with producers is, for example, professional textiles. So that's not only workwear, but also hotel linen, industrial textiles. That's something that's not represented at all, even though it's a very important group of textiles, also from a circularity perspective. So that's one of the stakeholders that we have on board, is way more representative of B2B. But specifically when it comes to drafting the legislation, you need to have the social enterprises on board, you need to have municipalities on board, you need to have representatives of recyclers on board, so social enterprises can also be the sorters, it can be the reuse shops, and that's sort of the starting point. So we feel that the legislation is often drafted without those stakeholders, even though, let's face it, it's specifically the social enterprises and the sorters and the recyclers that have, at least in the Netherlands, have kept the system in place way before EPR was there. So you can't just put a new system in place without them being involved. So that's that's sort of in a nutshell what I would say.
Thank you so much. Maybe a question for Theresa and anyone else who feel like answering. There's a question in the chat from Caroline Brebon, was asking the following. In addition to the key direction EPR should take to succeed, have you started developing specific wording that the EU Commission could be using in the CEA or future revisions of the Waste Framework Directive? So what concretely needs to be embedded in policy to deliver the circularity ambition? And this is quite related to one question I had for you, which was if you could just tell us, like, what are the immediate next steps within the CEA and the EU that should be taken?
Yeah, thanks, Manon. And thanks, Caroline, for the good question. That's indeed the million-dollar question. What exactly should the EU do? We're still in that progress. And to Perhaps to fill everyone in, so the European Commission is planning a new law, the Circular Economy Act, that will amend a couple of other laws that already exist on waste in general, waste from redirective, and some adjacent measures. There's a current ongoing public consultation that we encourage everyone to respond to if you have an idea about what should be changed. I'm sure someone could put the link in the chat. And to get back to your question about the kind of specific wording, so the first thing that we would suggest, going back to the double fee structure that I covered earlier, is that we need to amend the definition of EPR and what the fees should cover. Currently, it says EPR should cover the waste management. That's not the exact wording, but if you look at the law, this is more or less what it means. And this is what's more or less happening. Not the whole waste management is covered, but huge part of it, and we need to redefine it in a way that it covers more of the life cycle of the product. It covers upstream measure, it covers reuse, repair, prevention measures, and that's working on that definition and what the fees should cover, I think, is the key thing for us to propose at the moment. But then obviously it gets much more complicated. There were some questions in the chat about the eco-modulation or the eco-design fee and how this could become an EU resource. This is maybe a little more complicated because EU own resources are difficult thing to push through. Obviously, member states don't like to give any more responsibilities to the EU, and yeah, this is something that we'd like to be in touch with you also. If you have any proposals, if you like to work on this specific proposals, wordings for the Circular Economy Act, please do reach out to me or my colleagues, and we're very happy to further engage and brainstorm about what exactly should be included or shouldn't be included. I hope that answers the questions. Otherwise, feel free to post more in the chat.
I think it did. Thank you. Perhaps a question for Ulysse now, but also I think the local authority presented here could give their perspective on this. So we talked a lot today about how EPR system could fund reuse, fund prevention activities, and we have an example currently in Europe, which is in France, and I'm not being chauvinist here because I'm French. I think you all heard that. So yeah, we have this example in France. We have this fund for reuse where the packaging PRO has to allocate 5% of the budget to fund reuse activities in France. My question here would be, and I think this is a question for all speakers, Ulysse, you can start and the other can also answer. Do you think it's enough? Is this 5% good enough to advance circular economy? And is it something you think should be replicated, or should it be modified? Should it be like more ambitious? Like, if you could give us your perspective on this, that would be great.
Yes, I will answer, and I'm also French, as you hear with my accent, so I will try not to be too linguistic as well. But yes, just to answer easy your question, yes, we believe it's a good idea, and it's something we have also pushed during the negotiation of the packaging and packaging waste regulation. There was a moment where we wanted to have, for EPRs, to have a fund to finance reuse. In the end, through the negotiation process, this disappeared, and now it's only mentioned that there needs a part of the EPR fee that needs to finance prevention or reuse. Or like, it's not very clear mentioned that we need to finance reuse, plus we don't have a percentage. So in the French law, they have a percentage which mandates CTO, so the French PRO, and also l'ECO, that is in charge of the fee of the EPR fee for packaging, to use part of this fund, 5%, to finance reuse. And it's, I would say, a very good first step, because they have launched many projects. Just 2 days, last week already, I was attending the Reuse Day, where like they're presenting the result a bit about what they have been doing with the 5%. They've launched a quite ambitious project, so it's called the Reuse Project, and they are launching a pilot project for reuse packaging in the northwest of France. It's going to touch more than 16 million inhabitants. We have more than 50 brands engaged and more than 400 stores that are already involved. So this is a great project at French level, like very at scale. So such finance can help and can launch the creation of the project, which we will all learn from. So that's the first positive aspect. So they can create their own project. And second, they are also financing a lot of projects. In France, they created a call for tender, encore plus de remploi, so more reuse. And here they have dedicated more than 40 million euros just in 2025, which is quite a huge amount of money that will benefit, of course, the reuse industry in France. However, we need to take into consideration that first, it's far from being enough when it comes to money. We need way more if we want to develop really reuse at scale. Like if we want to make reuse the norm, this is just a little part of it. Second thing is like there is a lack from what we hear from the different operators that are working in France, that there is a lack of transparency a bit, not very clear how the funds are allocated, to whom, etc. So that's the first problem. And second, as well, we hear from operators that are not operating in the northwest region of France, where the pilot is taking place. They feel a bit put aside. And so we need also to be sure that when you have such big project, to ensure that we don't prioritize too much a region over another that could create market disparities within the reuse industry. So yes, that's just to conclude, I think it's a very good signal, and others should do the same. Maybe if we were able to increase a bit the percentage of the fee that are in the city, that would be great, but already having 5%, it's a really good step.
I don't know if the local authorities here would like to react on this, or just
maybe. So I joined. So I'm a Frédéric, a project manager for the city of Brussels, and maybe on that one, well, there are a few things. Like I think as a local authority, as a municipality, I feel like yes, we don't really know what's going on, what's being said behind the doors. So we would like to at least be somehow involved in that decision process. I don't know how, but at least more communication at the regional and federal level with local authorities, so that we can share our input and feedback, and also receive more information. I think in Belgium, we don't know really what's going on, how much money there is allocated to help to the promotion of reuse in general, for example. And I believe that the PROs should really help us to not only to go from local isolated pilots to more systemic change. Like it would be ideal, for example, to work on a big reuse project for the entire region of Brussels, but that means for a city, for example, like us, if we want to initiate something, we feel like we don't have the financial means, and also we are lacking some strategic and political support at the higher level to go for something bigger. So yes, like a certain amount of money is good, but I think in the case of reuse, it has to be put at the top level, and making them strategic objectives for the EPR schemes, not just like a side project.
Yeah. I don't know, Frédéric Selmans, if you want to complement this, or
I wanted to do to more put it in general, because of course on the local level I share absolutely the remarks that of course Frédéric a fait. But in general, I think it's a very good idea, and obviously 5% is not much, and it should be more. But anyway, I think that we could be glad if Belgium would join the same legislation. And also, what I also think is very interesting is that France also made it mandatory for external businesses, if I'm not mistaken, who are investing in France or selling their product in France. So you have like a spillover effect, where you don't only have 5%, which is put into place on the French market, but also making foreign enterprises, like for example a Belgian company, responsible for its 5% in France, and maybe also then taking it to Belgium as well, even without legislation. That's something that is really interesting as well. And also, I think it was 7% for businesses which are bigger than a revenue over a certain amount of income, if I'm not mistaken, is it? So it's actually already 7% for like a big quantity of enterprises, or is it just 5% all over? It's maybe a question to bounce back. I'll ask it to you.
Yeah, I think, Elise, do you want to answer this? Or
yes, maybe I see that there is also like the French Free Association, so maybe they know better than me. But from the way I understand it, like in France, it's like the EPR scheme that take like the money they collect, and then they take 5% of it dedicated. I wasn't aware that there was something specific for the producer that le metteur en marché, yes, producer, to dedicate 7%. So I'm not aware about that, but maybe it's just that, yeah, I don't have the information. It's a possibility as well.
There are still a lot of questions in the chat. I mean, 3 actually. I think we will try to get them answered in written form later on, so no worries. But perhaps a last one, again, for local authorities, or yeah, if you want to answer this, perhaps Eric, you mentioned that one of the next steps, or at least strategic opportunity for your city, was to be more involved in PRO decision making and governance. My question for you is quite simple. How would you like to be involved as a local authority in PRO decision making and governance? What's missing currently?
You mean on the member state level, or you mean the Europe Commission level?
No, I mean you as a local authority. How would you like to be involved within producer responsibility organization when it comes to decision making and generally speaking, and governance? This was one point of your presentation, but if you can also answer that later on. That's also
yes. It's a bit complicated. Yeah, right now we're doing a lot of cooperation in the environmental ministry. We're doing a lot of discussions, and they're also what's the word of it? They're a bit exhausted because it's late lunch time. But they're like doing a lot of cooperation on the meetings, and they're all listening us. That's a really good part, because the environmental ministry has a really big role in this part. So
okay, if they listen to you, that's great.
yeah, because we're the biggest municipality in Estonia, so that's the reason.
Yeah,
the smaller ones don't have time to do implement it. They don't have the time to do it. So we in Tallinn have. We take the time. We have prioritized this field.
No, that's perfect.
But I don't have a really good answer for this. Definitely, more cooperation is better. On the zero waste side, on the Europe Commission side, we have also the lobby organization that's put together all the cities in Estonia that's representing us in the Europe Commission level. So we don't have time to go there all the time, but yeah, we all have one organization for this.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, time unfortunately to close this webinar. There are a few remaining questions in the chat. I think most of them have actually been answered. So thank you for the panelists for their work. For the remaining questions, we'll make sure to answer them later on, and maybe to send you a follow-up email. But perhaps a few words to close this webinar, and a few call to actions. So as Teresa mentioned, until November 6th, there's the possibility for you to respond to the EU public consultation of the Circular Economy Act. I think we can put the link in the chat if we haven't done that yet. Sorry, I haven't seen it. It's there actually. So yeah, so perfect. Feel free to answer. Deadline November 6th. But also, this is an invitation for you all to get active at the national level in the development of EPR. As you know, there are like a few EPR in the making, and it's going to be mandatory to have an EPR for textile across Europe by mid-2028. So there's currently a big gap to cover, as there is already a collection mandate for textiles, but still not EPR. So this is really like the right momentum to push for the right EPR governance, the right EPR structure for textiles. So like, yeah, let's get active and organize ourselves around key best practices like CCT, and yeah, to generalize those best practices as well. And finally, this is an invitation for you all to help us amplify our demands. Share the manifesto. We will put the link here, the manifesto that has been backed up by, as I say, 36, a coalition of 36 stakeholders, cities, and reuse providers, and share the letter that we have sent to the European Commission that, again, reunited 38 national civil society organizations around key recommendations that Teresa has presented you earlier. So thank you so much for your time and participation. I hope this was interesting. And yeah, we'll keep in touch. We will send you the recording and the slides of this webinar after all. So yeah, you can expect a follow-up email from us. Thank you so much. Have a nice lunch.